It's strange, the way memories have a way of sneaking up on you, sitting quietly in the corner of your mind, waiting for the right moment to leap out and catch you off guard. It's been years since I last saw Michael, but there are still days when I hear his voice, feel his hand on my shoulder, or even smell his cologne on the old jacket I wear when it gets cold. Sometimes, I wonder if I ever really learned how to let him go. My name is Veronica Johnson. I'm 50 years old, a mother of two, and a woman who's learned how to fight the world with nothing more than my grit and my faith. It's been 5 years since my husband Michael died. 5 years since my world turned upside down, shattering like a glass that fell off the kitchen counter. I think it's important you know that. It's important for you to understand that I didn't expect anything from anyone, not even from myself, after Michael passed away. I didn't expect anything other than to keep my head down, work hard, and do my best to make sure my children, Meyer and Jamal, didn't feel the absence of their father too acutely. But that's the thing about life. It doesn't wait for you to catch your breath. The apartment we live in is small, tucked between two rundown buildings in a neighborhood that doesn't get much attention. Sometimes I think about how it used to be when Michael was around. The way his laughter would echo through the house, how he'd hold my hand as we sat on the porch, watching the kids run around in the yard. Now, I sit on the edge of my bed, looking at the photos of us on the walls, trying to remember what it felt like when things were easier. The thing about being a widow, about being alone in a world that doesn't care much for people like me, is that you learn how to smile even when you don't feel like it. You learn how to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders without showing a single crack in your armor. You have to. For them, for Maya, for Jamal. Jamal's just 16, but he's seen more hardship than any child should. Maya's 20, trying to make her way through college, working a part-time job at the grocery store, struggling to keep up with her schoolwork while still sending money home for rent. It's hard not to see her as a little girl when she comes home after a long shift, her face tired and weary, but I know she's growing up. Too fast. I know what you're thinking. Why doesn't she ask for help? That's a question I've asked myself more times than I can count. But the truth is, pride, like a silent partner, sits at my kitchen table every night, sipping coffee with me, keeping me from asking for the help I need. You see, in this world, help often comes with strings attached. I didn't want anyone to feel obligated to rescue us. I had to do this on my own. It was just the way things were. But things were getting tight, and I could feel it. The bills were stacking up, the credit card statements were growing, and the food pantry wasn't quite as stocked as it used to be. I could see the worry in Maya's eyes when she'd come home from her job, and Jamal, God bless him, tried his best to hide the fact that he was struggling in school. Every day felt like a race I couldn't win. It was a Tuesday when I felt it, that wave of helplessness that almost knocked me off my feet. Maya had called me in the morning, her voice higher than usual, like she was trying to hide the stress. She had this way of doing that, hiding everything beneath a layer of cheerfulness. "Mom, I think I can't make rent this month. My paycheck doesn't cover it," she had said. There it was, the thing I had been dreading, the thing I knew would come sooner or later. I tried to brush it off, pretending everything was fine. "Don't worry, baby, we'll figure it out. We always do," I had said, the words coming out of my mouth before I even thought about them. But as soon as I hung up, I felt it, the weight of the world pressing down on me, like I was suffocating under the pressure of promises I couldn't keep. I had always been the rock, the one they could count on, but now I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. It wasn't just the bills. It was the feeling that everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was slipping through my fingers. And then, as if the universe heard my thoughts, I got a call that would change everything. It was from Ethan Montgomery. Now, Ethan wasn't someone I knew well, but he was someone who worked in the same shopping center where I cleaned every day. He was one of those polished, well-dressed businessmen who seemed to glide through life without breaking a sweat. I had noticed him around, but we had never exchanged more than a few pleasantries. "MS. Johnson, I hope I'm not disturbing you." His voice came through the phone, smooth and professional. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately, about how hard you work. You know, I've been looking for someone with your skills to help in my office. Would you be interested in working for me? I can offer you a steady salary, better than what you're doing now." I was stunned. I thought it was some kind of mistake at first. Why would someone like him offer me a job? But when I asked, he explained that he had noticed my work ethic at the shopping center and admired my dedication. He said he wanted to help. Help. My pride made me hesitate, but the reality of my situation pushed me forward. I had nothing left to lose. The bills were due, Maya was struggling, and Jamal needed a stable environment to grow up in. For the first time in months, I felt a small flicker of hope. I'd like to meet with you, I told him, my voice cracking just a little. That night, I went to bed thinking about that call. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a dream come true. But it was a chance. A chance to break free from the chains that had bound me to a life of struggle. A chance to stop pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But I knew this was only the beginning. Because life doesn't hand you things on a silver platter, and it certainly doesn't give you a break just because you've suffered long enough. I had no idea where this path would take me or what kind of help Ethan Montgomery was really offering. But I knew one thing, something had to change. And I was about to find out just how much I was willing to sacrifice to make that change. The next morning, I woke up to the faint sound of birds chirping outside the small window of my bedroom, but there was no peace to be found in their song. My mind was still buzzing with thoughts of Ethan Montgomery's offer. The reality of what I had agreed to, taking a job from a man I barely knew, was starting to hit me. I could feel the unease in my chest, a knot tightening each time I thought about it. What kind of person was he really? And what did he want from me? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something I didn't fully understand. The pride inside me whispered that I should have said no, that I shouldn't be relying on the kindness of a stranger. But what choice did I have? The bills were piling up. Maya was barely scraping by with her part-time job, and Jamal needed me to be strong, to provide some kind of stability for him. My exhaustion, both physical and mental, was starting to overwhelm me, and the weight of it was unbearable. I tried not to show my worry to Jamal when he came downstairs for breakfast. His school uniform, wrinkled from the night before, hung loosely on his thin frame. He was always a quiet boy, never one for much conversation. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes, spoke volumes, eyes that had seen more than any boy his age should have to see. His father's absence had left a void that neither of us had been able to fill. "Good morning, Mom," he said, his voice soft as he sat at the table, reaching for the bowl of cereal I had set out for him. "Good morning, sweetheart," I replied, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I didn't want him to sense that something was off, not when I had so little left to give him. I sat down across from him, watching him spoon cereal into his mouth, the silence between us thick and heavy. I could see the tiredness in his face, the way he looked so much older than his 16 years. How could I not feel guilty? Here I was, still unable to give him the life I wanted, the life Michael and I had dreamed of when we first held him in our arms. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked after a moment, looking up from his bowl. I smiled, a forced thing, but I didn't want to burden him with the weight of my own doubts. "Yeah, just tired, same old." He didn't press further, and I was thankful for that. Jamal was a good boy, too good, really. But sometimes I wished he would ask more, push harder, because maybe then I wouldn't feel like I was keeping him at arm's length. Maybe then he would know how much I loved him. "I'm going to see Maya later," I said, trying to change the subject. "Maybe we can grab dinner after her shift. How does that sound?" Jamal shrugged, his eyes flicking to the clock on the wall. "Yeah, sounds good. She said she's got another shift this evening?" I nodded. "She's working late tonight. I thought we could all use a little time together, just the three of us." Jamal didn't respond, just finished his cereal and stood up. He didn't want to talk anymore, and I didn't push him. He had learned, just like I had, how to fill the silence with nothing. When he left for school, I stayed behind, my hands wrapped tightly around the coffee mug, the steam rising and curling in the cool morning air. I had a few hours before I needed to meet Ethan, and I didn't know what to do with the time. I cleaned the house in a mechanical haze, my mind stuck on the events of the past few days. Every time I thought about Ethan's offer, the knot in my stomach tightened. I had worked as a janitor for years, scrubbing floors and cleaning bathrooms at the shopping center where Ethan owned his office. I had always kept my head down, minding my own business. But when he called me, when he told me he had a job for me, I felt as if the earth had shifted beneath my feet. I had always been a woman who took pride in her independence, in providing for my children without anyone's help. I had done it for years, worked myself to the bone to keep things together. Now, Ethan was offering me something I couldn't afford to turn down. I glanced at my phone. It was almost time to leave. My heart raced as I grabbed my jacket, pulling it on and making my way to the door. The drive to Ethan's office was quiet, the streets looking almost foreign to me as I drove past the well-kept houses in neighborhoods I'd never been a part of. Ethan's office was in a modern building in the middle of downtown, its sleek glass exterior gleaming in the midday sun. I parked and walked through the revolving doors, trying to steady my nerves. His secretary greeted me with a smile, her perfectly styled hair and pressed suit a stark contrast to my simple dress and cardigan. "Mr. Montgomery will be with you shortly," she said, and I nodded, sinking into one of the leather chairs in the waiting area. I could hear the soft hum of conversations from the other side of the office, the sound of people talking about things I couldn't quite understand. Business, success, money, the kind of things I had only ever heard about in passing. When Ethan walked in, I barely recognized him at first. Gone was the polished, professional businessman I had seen around the shopping center. Instead, he was dressed casually, in jeans and a button-down shirt, his sleeves rolled up. There was something warm about his smile, a kindness that didn't quite match the sharpness of his surroundings. "Veronica," he said, extending his hand. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Thank you for the offer," I replied, shaking his hand. I was trying to stay calm, trying to keep my nerves in check, but it wasn't easy. "Please have a seat," Ethan said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. "I've been thinking a lot about you since we spoke. Your work ethic, your dedication. It's rare to find someone like you. That's why I think you'd be perfect for the position." I sat down, my heart still pounding in my chest. "I appreciate that, Ethan. I'm just not sure. I've never worked in an office before. I've always been a janitor. It's all I know." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's exactly why I want you on my team. You're dependable, you're hardworking, and you know what it means to do a job well. This position won't be anything too difficult, just some administrative work, answering calls, keeping things running smoothly. And the best part is, you'll have a steady income, which I know you could use." I felt the weight of his words settle over me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something other than worry. I felt a glimmer of hope. I left Ethan's office that afternoon with a new sense of purpose, even though I couldn't quite shake the nagging feeling that I was making a mistake. But what other choice did I have? I couldn't keep going like this, not for Maya, not for Jamal. And so, as I drove home, the road ahead of me seemed both uncertain and full of possibility. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might be able to take a step forward. Maybe, just maybe, I was about to start something new. The first few days after I accepted Ethan's offer felt like a strange mix of relief and dread. I spent hours getting ready for work, choosing my clothes with care, trying to look like someone who belonged in an office, not someone who had spent the last decade scrubbing floors and cleaning restrooms. I didn't want to feel like an outsider, but it was hard to ignore the fear gnawing at me, the fear that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong. Maya didn't understand. She didn't get why I would take a job from a man who barely knew me, someone who was so far removed from our lives. She was always protective of me, always on edge, and I couldn't blame her. She had seen the hard side of life. I had kept her in the dark about many things, but she wasn't blind. She could see the strain in my face, the way I held myself together when everything inside was falling apart. "Mama," she had said the night before my first day, her voice hesitant, "are you sure about this? I mean, he's a stranger, right? You've always told me not to trust anyone." I could feel her concern, the worry lining her face like it always did when something didn't sit right with her. Maya had been forced to grow up too fast. At 20, she was already carrying the weight of responsibilities I should have been shouldering. She was trying to juggle her classes and her part-time job while also worrying about me, about Jamal and what would happen to us. "I know, baby," I replied, my voice soft but steady. "I've thought about it, but right now we need the help. Things are getting tight, and I can't keep pretending everything is okay. If this job can help us get back on our feet, if it gives us a chance to breathe, then I'm going to take it. She looked at me, her brow furrowed, then nodded reluctantly. Just be careful, okay? I don't want you to get hurt. I won't. I promised, even though I wasn't sure if I meant it. I was telling her what she needed to hear, not what I was feeling. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I was walking into. The morning of my first day at Ethan's office, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blouse one last time, trying to look confident, trying to look like someone who belonged. I was nervous, no, terrified, but I had no choice but to press forward. The world wasn't going to stop for me, and if I didn't find a way to make it work, everything I had sacrificed for my kids would be in vain. When I arrived at the office, the receptionist greeted me with a smile, a warm welcome that felt genuine, but also a little too perfect. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything around me was a little too polished, too neat. But Ethan was right about one thing: this was a chance. I had to take it. MS. Johnson, we're so glad you're here, she said, leading me through the spacious office. The hallway was lined with glass walls that offered a glimpse into private offices, where well-dressed people sat at desks talking business. It felt like I had walked into another world, one I had only seen in movies or on TV. Ethan was waiting for me in a small conference room, his casual attire putting me a little more at ease, though I still couldn't shake the nervousness running through my veins. Veronica, welcome, he said, standing up and shaking my hand with a firm grip. I'm glad you could make it. Please sit down. Let's talk about what I have in mind for you. I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap, trying to hide the tremor in my fingers. Thank you for this opportunity, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Ethan smiled, his gaze steady and calm. I've been thinking about how we can start small, help you get used to things here. You'll be doing a variety of tasks, answering calls, managing schedules, handling some paperwork. Nothing too complicated, but I know you'll pick it up quickly. The most important thing is that I need someone reliable, someone who understands the value of hard work. And from what I've seen, you're exactly that person. His words were kind, but something about them felt too easy, too convenient. I wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that this was a genuine opportunity, but I knew better than to let my guard down completely. Life had taught me to be cautious, to never take anything at face value. I'll do my best, I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. I wasn't sure if my best would be good enough, but I had to try. The first few days were overwhelming, as expected. There was so much to learn, so many systems I wasn't familiar with. But despite the frustration, I pushed through. Every time I felt myself faltering, I thought about Maya's face, about Jamal's quiet smile. And I kept going. I couldn't let them down, not now, not after everything we had been through. By the end of the week, I had settled into a routine. Ethan's office was quiet, efficient, and everything ran smoothly, just as he had promised. But the more time I spent there, the more I began to notice things, small things, subtle things. The way Ethan would look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his conversations with his employees seemed just a little too casual, a little too personal. He had a charm about him, something magnetic, something that made you want to trust him. But still, that nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. There was something about this place that didn't sit right. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I was being watched, like I was being evaluated, and that discomfort only grew as the days passed. One afternoon, as I was organizing a stack of files, Ethan walked into the office with two other men. They were all dressed in sharp suits, their faces unreadable. Ethan smiled at me, as if he hadn't noticed my discomfort. Veronica, he said, his voice light, I'd like you to meet a couple of colleagues of mine. They're handling some of the bigger projects we've got going on. He introduced me to the two men, but I barely heard their names. The unease that had been creeping up on me reached a new height. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something I wasn't prepared for. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it in my bones. The same feeling I had when Michael first told me we were expecting Maya, the same sense of foreboding that had lingered when things weren't right at home, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I had a job to do, a chance to make things better for my family. I had to focus. No matter how unsettling everything felt, I couldn't let it stop me. That night, when I got home, Maya was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook open in front of her, scribbling furiously. She didn't look up when I walked in, but I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the same exhaustion I was beginning to feel. "How was work?" she asked, her voice tired but hopeful. "Fine," I said, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Not yet. "Just a lot to get used to, but I think I'll manage." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. I wasn't sure what I was going to do if this job didn't work out. I wasn't sure what I was going to do if Ethan's offer wasn't as innocent as it seemed. But as I watched Maya, the weight of my own uncertainty began to settle in my chest. If I didn't do this, if I didn't make this work, I didn't know where we'd be. And that fear, that all-consuming fear, was more powerful than anything else. So I pushed forward for her, for Jamal, and for the life we still had to build. The days blurred together, each one running into the next like a never-ending cycle. I woke up early every morning, got ready for work, and went to Ethan's office. The routine became my anchor, even though something inside me, a quiet voice, maybe, kept whispering that it wasn't enough. I wasn't sure what I expected to find at Ethan's office, but every time I walked through those doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Not with the work itself. It was easy enough to follow the instructions he gave me, but something in the air, something about the way he looked at me at times, made me uncomfortable. I tried to ignore it. I had a job now, a steady paycheck, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was sinking. But that's the thing about being a mother. You never stop worrying, never stop wondering what kind of life you're giving your children, even when you're trying to do your best. And lately, that worry had only intensified. Maya had been pulling away from me. I could feel the distance growing between us, though she never said anything outright. She was busy with her job, her classes, and yet every time I looked at her, I saw a cloud of concern hanging over her, concern that she wasn't voicing, but it was there. And it made my heart ache in ways I couldn't explain. I had hoped that by taking the job with Ethan, things would get easier, that I could breathe a little easier, but instead, it felt like I was treading water, never quite able to reach solid ground. At night after the office, I still had to manage the house, make sure Jamal was doing his homework, and try to find time for Maya and me to have some semblance of a normal conversation. But it wasn't the same. There was too much unspoken, too many things left hanging in the air. One evening, Maya came home later than usual. She walked through the door, dropped her bag on the floor, and didn't say anything. It was a quiet evening, no television, no music playing in the background like we used to, just the sound of the refrigerator humming and the distant noise of cars on the street outside. I knew something was bothering her. She sat down at the kitchen table, her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world was resting on them. "How was work?" she asked, her voice flat. "Fine," I said, setting down the plates I had just finished preparing for dinner. "It's getting easier. I'm starting to feel like I might actually be good at this." She didn't look up, didn't respond. She just stared at her hands, folded neatly on the table in front of her. I couldn't take the silence anymore. I needed to know what was going on with her. "Maya," I said gently, sitting down across from her. "What's wrong? You've been distant for a while now. If something's bothering you, you know you can talk to me." She finally looked up, but her eyes were guarded, like she was trying to keep something from me. "It's nothing, Mom. I'm just tired. School's a lot, work's a lot." I knew she wasn't being honest. She was always honest with me, even when it hurt, but not now, and I couldn't understand why. "You know you don't have to work, right?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You're in school. You should be focused on that. I can take care of things here. You don't have to work all the time." She shook her head, her eyes now more intense. "You don't get it, Mom. I'm not doing this just for me. I'm doing it for all of us. I can't let you carry everything on your own." I stared at her, feeling the weight of her words like a punch to the gut. I had tried to shield her from the truth. I had tried to be strong for both of us, but she was right. She had been shouldering her own burdens for a while, and now I was asking her to carry mine too. "Maya," I whispered, the guilt flooding in, "I'm sorry. I never meant for you to feel like you had to do this." "I don't blame you, Mom," she said quickly, her voice softening. "I know you're doing your best, but it's not just the money. It's everything. I don't like seeing you struggle. I don't like knowing you're doing it alone. And I hate seeing you give so much to a job you don't even like. It's not you. That hit harder than I expected. Maya had always been wise beyond her years, but hearing her talk like this made me realize just how much she had grown up without me even noticing. How had I let this happen? How had I let her become the one looking after me instead of the other way around? I'm sorry, baby, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. I didn't mean to drag you into all of this. I didn't want you to feel like you had to help me. She stood up suddenly and walked over to me, wrapping her arms around me in a hug. I know you didn't, but I'm your daughter, Mom. That's what family does. We take care of each other. I squeezed her tight, holding on like I hadn't held on in a long time. The truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could do it on my own. Every day was getting harder. The bills were piling up, and even though Ethan's job was helping, it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed something, someone, to make everything feel less overwhelming, but I didn't know who or what that was. The next day at work, I couldn't shake the weight of the conversation I had with Maya. It was like an invisible cloud hanging over me, making everything seem a little more distant. Ethan noticed it too. He had been checking in on me more often, asking if I was okay. And for the first time, I wasn't sure how to answer him. Was I okay? Did I even know what okay felt like anymore? During lunch that day, Ethan pulled me aside. Veronica, I can tell something's on your mind, he said. You've been distracted. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. I'm not just your employer, I'm your friend too. I hesitated for a moment. His words, his kindness were genuine, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that there was something beneath the surface I wasn't seeing. Maybe it was the way he looked at me sometimes, the way his gaze lingered just a little too long, or maybe it was just my own inability to trust anyone fully. I'm fine, Ethan, I said, managing a weak smile. Just dealing with family stuff, you know how it is. He nodded, but I could see the concern still there in the crease of his brow. You're doing a great job here. Don't forget to take care of yourself, too. You can't help anyone if you're running on empty. I thanked him and quickly left the conversation, my heart racing. For a moment, I almost wondered if he was right, that maybe I wasn't just working for my family, but trying to fill some empty space inside myself. But that wasn't something I could admit, not even to myself. Not yet. I drove home that evening with a heavy heart, my mind racing through the things I couldn't control. But when I pulled into the driveway and saw Jamal's familiar face in the window, and Maya standing there with her worried eyes, I knew that this family, was the one thing I couldn't let go of. And no matter how difficult the road ahead was, I would fight for them. I would fight until I had nothing left. The weeks that followed blurred into a haze of work, school, and the constant undercurrent of anxiety that I couldn't shake. My days at Ethan's office began to feel like a strange sort of limbo, neither here nor there. The tasks he assigned me were straightforward, but I could feel a growing tension in the air every time I walked into the building. Something about the way he looked at me, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, started to make my skin crawl in a way I couldn't explain. I pushed those feelings aside, though. I had to. I couldn't afford to focus on what made me uncomfortable. What mattered was that the job was steady. It was helping. It was helping Maya, helping Jamal. That was all I needed to hold on to. But at home, things weren't as simple. Maya and Jamal were slipping further away from me, each in their own way. Jamal had become more distant, retreating into his room for hours, barely speaking. I had noticed the change in him, the way he seemed to carry a weight far heavier than his 16 years should have to bear. I knew he was struggling, but every time I tried to talk to him, he shut me out. He wouldn't tell me what was going on in his head, and as much as I tried to respect his space, it ate away at me. Maya, too, had changed. She was still working long hours at the grocery store, squeezing in hours between her college classes, but she wasn't the same bright-eyed girl who had once come home excited to share her day with me. Now, she was quiet, withdrawn, as if she were carrying a burden too heavy for her shoulders. I couldn't help but feel that my taking this job, that my trying to find stability for us all, had made everything worse. I wasn't the mother I wanted to be. I could see that now. I was trying so hard to give them what I thought they needed: financial stability, a roof over their heads, the ability to breathe for just a moment. But in doing so, I had neglected what they truly needed: me. They needed my time, my attention, my emotional support. and I had failed them. The guilt of that weighed on me, sinking deeper with every passing day. One evening, after I got home from work, I found Maya sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the half-empty mug of coffee in front of her. She looked older than her 20 years, her face lined with fatigue and worry. I had seen that look before, but this time, it seemed like she wasn't just tired. She was worn down. Maya, I said softly, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. Talk to me, please. She looked up at me, her eyes empty, distant. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again like she couldn't find the words. Maya, you don't have to carry this all by yourself, I said, reaching out to take her hand. I know things haven't been easy, but I'm here. I'm always here for you. She pulled her hand back slowly, her face hardening, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the barrier she had put up between us. I'm fine, Mom, she said, her voice cold. I don't need you to fix everything, I can handle it. I recoiled slightly, the harshness of her tone cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. But it wasn't just that, it was the distance, the emotional wall between us that had been slowly, almost imperceptibly, growing. Maya, I said, struggling to find the right words, I just want to help. I want to be here for you. You don't have to go through all of this alone. I'm still your mother. I haven't forgotten that. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. You don't get it, she said, her voice shaking with frustration. You've been so focused on working, on getting that stupid job that you don't see what's happening to me. What's happening to us? We're falling apart, Mom, and you're just pretending everything's okay. I stood up too, the words hitting me harder than I could have anticipated. What do you mean, pretending? I asked, my voice rising without me meaning for it to. I'm trying to hold things together, Maya. I'm trying to make sure you and Jamal have what you need. I'm doing everything I can. She shook her head, her eyes filled with unshed tears. You're not doing anything, Mom. You're working for some guy who doesn't care about you, and you're giving up on us. You don't see how much we need you here with us, not in some office. Her words struck like a blow, each one leaving a bruise that I couldn't hide. But as much as it hurt to hear her say it, I knew she was right. Somewhere along the way, in my desperation to fix everything, I had stopped being the mother I used to be. I had stopped being the anchor she needed. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Maya. I never wanted you to feel like this. Maya didn't say anything more. She just walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, alone with the harsh reality of everything I had failed to see. The next day at work, I tried to push the conversation out of my mind, but I couldn't. Every time I saw Maya's face in my mind, every time I remembered the coldness in her voice, my stomach tightened with guilt. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to make things right between us. Ethan noticed my mood when I walked into the office that morning. He had always been perceptive, always seemed to know when something was off. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to burden him with my family problems, but he pulled me aside during the break and sat me down. Veronica, he said, his voice kind, I can tell something's bothering you. If you need to talk, I'm here. I wanted to shut him out. I didn't want to lean on him, didn't want to make this complicated, but I couldn't deny the comfort his presence gave me, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to be looking for that in him. I trailed off, unsure of what to say. I'm not doing well. I'm trying to keep it together, but I feel like everything's falling apart. Ethan's expression softened, his eyes looking at me with a kind of understanding I wasn't used to. You can't fix everything by yourself, Veronica. You're only human. You have to let people in, even when it's hard. I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words press down on me. I don't know how to let people in anymore. I don't know how to fix what's broken. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture so simple yet so kind that it caught me off guard. You don't have to fix everything. Just take it one step at a time. And remember, you're not alone. The words felt hollow at first, like they were meant to comfort, but they didn't quite reach the part of me that was in turmoil. Still, I appreciated them. I needed them, even if I couldn't let myself believe them fully. That night, when I returned home, I found Maya sitting on the couch, her arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't look up when I came in, but I could tell she was waiting for me. I sat beside her, my heart heavy, unsure of what to say. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. Finally, I spoke. Maya, I said softly, I know I've been distant. I've been trying to fix things without realizing that I was breaking the most important thing I have, you. You and Jamal, I'm sorry for everything. She turned her head slowly, meeting my gaze. Her eyes were red, but the anger that had been there earlier was gone. I just need you to be here, Mom. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be present. I'm here, I said, taking her hand. I'll always be here, I promise. And in that moment, for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could start to make things right. The days following my conversation with Maya were like walking through a fog. There was relief, yes, but there was also a deep ache, a hole that I wasn't sure how to fill. The weight of Maya's words lingered with me. I just need you to be here, Mom. I had been so focused on surviving, on keeping the wheels turning for all of us, that I had forgotten what truly mattered, being present, not just physically, but emotionally. I had tried to hold it all together to be the mother, the provider, the one who kept things running. But somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of what I was supposed to be. The truth was, I hadn't been there for Maya and Jamal in the ways they needed. And now, every time I looked at them, I saw not the children I had raised, but two young adults who were quietly bearing the weight of everything I had put on them. Maya went to bed early that night, retreating to her room without much more than a mumbled good night. Jamal was already in his room, headphones on, lost in the world of his video games. He didn't talk much anymore, but I could tell he was thinking, always thinking. I couldn't help but wonder what was going through his mind. Was he angry at me too? Was he suffering in ways I couldn't see? I spent the evening sitting on the couch, feeling the emptiness of the space around me. I had tried so hard to make everything better, to give them a life that was better than the one we had before. But the more I tried, the further I seemed to push them away. I couldn't help but feel like a failure. I tried to focus on work the next day, but the weight of my own guilt kept creeping in. I couldn't concentrate. Ethan had been kind, as always, but the unease I had been feeling around him had only grown. His kindness, his interest in me, had started to feel less like generosity and more like something else. I tried to brush it off, but something inside me told me I was missing something, something important. As I sat at my desk, organizing some files, Ethan walked into the room with a cup of coffee in his hand, as he often did in the mornings. He had that smile of his, the kind that was warm, inviting, but held something I couldn't quite place. "How's everything going, Veronica?" he asked, his voice casual, but his eyes lingering on mine a little too long. "It's going fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Busy as usual." He set the coffee cup down in front of me. "You know, you've been working really hard lately. I appreciate everything you've been doing here." I didn't know how to respond. I was grateful for the job, but his words, his tone began to feel like too much, like he was trying to say something without saying it. "Thanks," I said, looking down at the desk, trying to focus on something, anything, that would keep me from feeling too exposed. There was a brief pause, and I could feel him watching me. "I know you've had a lot on your plate lately, Veronica. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. You don't have to do this alone, you know." His words were innocent enough, but there was something in the way he said them, in the way he looked at me, that made me uncomfortable. I forced a smile, trying to brush it off. "I'm fine, Ethan. Really? I have a lot to juggle, but I'm managing." He nodded, but the way his eyes lingered on me made me feel like I wasn't managing at all. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that I was being measured, like I was some project that he was eager to fix. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks and quiet conversations with Ethan, but all I could think about was what he had said. It was nothing, I told myself. He was just being kind, just trying to be supportive, but my gut told me otherwise. There was something there, something I wasn't seeing, and it was starting to gnaw at me. That evening when I got home, I was exhausted. Physically, mentally, emotionally. But Maya wasn't home yet, and Jamal was still locked in his room. I had hoped to have some time to myself, to think, to reflect on the mess I was creating in my own life. But instead, I found myself waiting for something that never came, the sense of peace I had been craving for so long. When Maya came home, it was nearly midnight. She walked in quietly, her eyes red, her hair disheveled. I didn't have to ask, I knew she had been crying. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly, my voice thick with concern. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but I could see the lie in her eyes. "Yeah, just tired." I knew she was trying to avoid talking about whatever was bothering her, and I wasn't going to push. But something told me that whatever was weighing on her, whatever was causing her to stay away from me, was something I couldn't fix just by being present. It was something deeper than that. She walked past me, heading for her room, and I felt the familiar pang of guilt in my chest. I wanted to reach out to hold her to tell her that everything would be okay, but I knew the truth. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to fix this. The next day, things seemed to get worse. At work, the tension between Ethan and me grew. I couldn't escape the feeling that he was trying to get closer to me in ways I wasn't comfortable with. He was always there, always watching, always making small gestures that felt too intimate for a workplace. It started with the coffee, then it was offering to drive me home, then inviting me to lunch, just the two of us. I had begun to feel like I was suffocating under his attention. And the more he reached out, the more I pulled back until one afternoon, after a particularly awkward lunch where I had found myself laughing at a joke I didn't understand, I finally snapped. "I can't keep doing this, Ethan," I said, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I'm not here for anything other than work. I need to focus on my family, and I need to focus on myself." He looked at me, a mixture of surprise and confusion in his eyes. "Veronica, I'm sorry," I said, cutting him off. "But I can't. I have too much going on. I don't need you to be anything more than my employer. I just need to get through the day, and that's all." For a moment, the room was silent. Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at me as if trying to figure out if I was serious or just confused. But I was serious. I had to be. That night, as I walked back to my car, the weight of what I had just said hit me. I had drawn a line, had told him where I stood, but I knew it wasn't going to be the end of it. I knew that the path I was on was only going to get harder, and I didn't know if I had the strength to keep going. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Maya was asleep, Jamal was still locked in his room, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I sank into the couch, the weight of the day, of everything that had happened, crashing down on me. I wasn't sure if I could do this anymore. I wasn't sure if I had the strength to keep pretending that everything was okay. But then I thought of Maya and Jamal. I thought of how much they needed me, how much I needed them. And that's when I realized I had to keep going, for them. No matter how hard it got, no matter how many lines I had to draw, I had to keep fighting. For them and for me. The week after the confrontation with Ethan passed in a blur. I tried my best to focus on work, but every time I stepped into the office, the weight of what had happened between us pressed heavily on my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan's attention was not just a simple act of kindness. I had drawn my line, but now I was left to deal with the uncomfortable tension it had caused. Every time he glanced my way, I couldn't help but wonder if he was still trying to figure me out, still hoping for something more than what I had clearly defined. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, mentally. The constant balancing act of family and work, of trying to make sure Maya and Jamal were okay while keeping a professional distance from Ethan, was starting to wear me thin. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of what was going wrong. I thought about the words I had spoken to Maya, how I promised to be there for her, to be present. I thought about Jamal, who had become even more distant in the last few days. And I thought about myself, the woman who had lost her sense of self in the battle to keep her family afloat. It wasn't just Ethan that I was avoiding now. I was avoiding everyone. I wasn't just losing my grip on the job, I was losing my connection with my children. I had given so much of myself to others that I didn't know how to give to the people who mattered most, my own family. That Friday, I found myself at the kitchen table, picking at a bowl of cold pasta, unable to bring myself to eat much. Maya had left earlier for another one of her shifts at the grocery store, and Jamal was, as usual, holed up in his room, probably playing games or watching videos, disconnected from everything around him. I was sitting there when I heard the front door open, followed by the sound of Maya's voice. She was talking quietly with someone, but I couldn't quite make out the words. It was unusual for her to bring anyone home without warning. I got up slowly and walked toward the living room, wondering if maybe she had invited a friend or classmate over. But when I saw who she was with, my heart sank. It was Ethan. Maya looked uncomfortable, standing stiffly next to him. I could tell she hadn't expected me to be home. Ethan stood awkwardly in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, and his usual easy confidence was replaced with something more tentative. I couldn't place it, but it made my stomach turn. Mom, Maya started, her voice faltering as she looked at me. Hi, Veronica, Ethan said, his voice a little too smooth. I hope it's okay. Maya mentioned you'd be home tonight, and I thought we could have a quick chat. I stood there frozen, unsure of what to say. I had no idea what was going on. Maya's eyes were pleading with me, and I realized that whatever was happening here, it was something she wasn't ready to talk about. I forced a smile, even though my insides were twisting. Sure, Ethan, come in. I didn't know you two were, well, I didn't expect this. Maya shifted uncomfortably, and I noticed the way her eyes avoided mine. She hadn't even acknowledged my presence in the way she usually did. The walls between us were growing thicker by the day. I stepped aside to let them both in, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. I wanted to understand, to know why Maya had brought Ethan to our home. What was going on here? As they both sat down on the couch, Maya's expression darkened and she shifted uneasily in her seat. Ethan, for once, seemed unsure of himself. He kept glancing at me as though measuring my reaction. Maya, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. What's going on? Why did you bring him here? Maya hesitated, then looked at me, her gaze sharp, her lips trembling with the weight of whatever she was holding back. Mom, please listen. Ethan's been helping me with a lot of things lately. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I had already felt the discomfort growing, but hearing it out loud made it real. Helping you with what, Maya? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though I could feel the frustration rising. She looked at Ethan briefly, almost for reassurance, and then back to me. I'm having a hard time keeping up with everything, school, work, the bills. And Ethan, he just wants to help me out. He's been giving me advice, and I don't know, Mom, I just thought maybe I could lean on him for a little while. I couldn't process what she was saying, but my mind was already running 1,000 miles an hour. I could see where this was going. Ethan's help had crossed a line. My gut had been right all along. I had ignored the signs, but now it was too obvious to deny. I looked at Ethan, whose calm demeanor had cracked just slightly. His smile was strained, his eyes darting between Maya and me. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off before he could say anything. No, Ethan, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and betrayal. You've done enough. This isn't help. This is manipulation. Maya flinched as if I had slapped her, but my words had to be said. I had let too much slide, tried to excuse too much. Ethan had crossed a line by involving himself in my daughter's life like this. The boundaries that should have been there were blurred, and I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. Mom, please, Maya whispered, her eyes pleading. I don't need you to fight my battles. I just need you to understand. I'm trying to fix things, and No, you're not fixing anything by letting him control everything. I interrupted, my voice rising with frustration. I don't know what's going on between you two, but you're not going to let him step in and solve your problems for you. That's not help, Maya. That's enabling. You've lost yourself in this, and I'm not going to let that happen. I turned to Ethan, who looked like he was about to argue, but I was done. You need to leave right now. He didn't say anything, but I saw the shift in his eyes, something between frustration and a knowing acceptance. He stood up slowly, looking at Maya with an unreadable expression before he left, leaving me and my daughter alone in the silence. Maya stared at the floor, her shoulders trembling as she fought to hold back tears. Maya, I said softly, sitting next to her, you can't keep relying on him. I'm here for you. I've always been here, but you need to trust me, okay? We're a family. We don't let outsiders in to fix what's broken. She didn't respond at first, and for a moment I thought she might shut me out again. But then she turned to me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks, vulnerability. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I just didn't know what else to do. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close, because this was the first time in a long time that I felt like we were finally on the same page. You're not alone, Maya. You never were. We sat in the silence for a long time, but this time it wasn't the painful kind of silence. It was the kind that came with understanding. The kind that promised we'd find a way back to each other, no matter how many mistakes we had to work through. And for the first time in a while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The silence that followed Ethan's departure hung in the air, thick and uneasy, but it wasn't suffocating. It was the kind of silence that felt like a breath, deep, slow, and necessary. Maya sat next to me, her head resting against my shoulder, her body tense but relieved at the same time. We hadn't spoken since Ethan left. We didn't need to. She was processing what had just happened, and I was too. The reality of it all hit me like a wave. Ethan had crossed a line, yes, but what bothered me more was how I had let things go on without addressing it. I had let him get too close to my daughter, let him offer her solutions when what she needed most was for me to step in, to be present, to stop hiding behind my work and my duties. I had been so focused on making sure we survived, on providing for them both, that I hadn't seen how much they needed me to be there. But that wasn't the full truth, was it? Because the truth was, I had been hiding too. I had been hiding from the mess I had made of everything, from the growing distance between me and my children, from the ways I had failed them. I had tried to fix everything by myself, but somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that fixing things wasn't the same as being the mother they needed me to be. I broke the silence first, turning to look at Maya. Her eyes were still red, but the anger I had seen earlier had softened. Maya, I said gently, I need you to know something. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not being there, for not seeing what you were going through. I've been so focused on surviving that I lost sight of what really matters, the family we still have, the love we still share. I don't want to be that kind of mother. I want to be here for you, truly here. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the weight in her eyes lift just a little. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. The truth was, we both knew the unspoken words, the ones that had hung between us for so long, could never be fully erased. But maybe, just maybe, we could start over. I reached out and took her hand, holding it tightly in mine. We're going to fix this, Maya, together. I'm not going to hide from you anymore. We're going to talk and we're going to work through this. It won't be easy, but I promise I'll do better for you, for us. She squeezed my hand back, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I don't want to keep going like this. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep inside me. You won't. I won't let you. The days that followed weren't easy, but they were a start. Meyer and I began to talk more about everything and about nothing. We went for walks after dinner, just the two of us, and I listened, really listened, to her struggles, to her fears, to the things that kept her up at night. And I shared my own thoughts, my own fears. For the first time in a long time, we started to find our way back to each other. At home, things were shifting. Jamal, though still quieter than I would have liked, started to open up little by little. One night, as we sat together in the living room, he quietly handed me a small piece of paper. On it, he had written a note, his handwriting sloppy but sincere. Mom, I know things have been rough, but I want you to know that I see you trying. I know you're doing your best. I'm proud of you. I didn't know what to say at first, so I simply hugged him. Tight. Jamal wasn't one for words, but his actions spoke louder than anything I could have imagined. He wasn't giving up on me, even when I had almost given up on myself. The following week, Meyer and I took a small step forward. We went out together, just the two of us, like we used to, into the city for a late lunch. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that things were changing. She talked about school, about work, about the things she wanted for her future. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just listening. I was part of the conversation. I was present. Meanwhile, at work, things had started to feel different as well. Ethan's presence in the office was less overwhelming. He still offered help and support, but I kept my distance. I didn't want to be rude, but I couldn't let the lines between professionalism and personal get blurred again. I was still figuring out how to manage everything, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't afford to let myself get distracted by anything, especially not Ethan. A few days later, Ethan approached me in the hallway at work. His face was earnest, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear what he had to say. Veronica, he said quietly, I think we need to talk. I hesitated, feeling a familiar unease rise in my chest. I think we've said everything that needs to be said, Ethan. His expression faltered, just for a moment, before he nodded. I understand. I didn't mean to cross any boundaries, I really didn't. I want what's best for you and your family. I looked him in the eye, feeling a surge of confidence that I hadn't felt in weeks. I know you think you're helping, but I need you to understand something. I don't need you to fix my life. I need to fix it myself. I'm capable of that, and I need space to do that for myself, for my children." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I respect that. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." And just like that, the weight I had been carrying lifted a little. I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself anymore. I wasn't afraid to set boundaries. The woman who had been lost in her own sacrifices, drowning in her desire to help everyone else, was starting to reclaim herself. When I got home that evening, I didn't feel the heaviness in my chest that had been there for so long. I felt lighter. I felt like I was beginning to breathe again. Maya was sitting at the kitchen table when I came in, the same soft expression on her face that she had worn the night we'd talked. She looked at me with an unspoken question in her eyes, but I smiled at her, genuinely, fully. "How's everything?" I asked, sitting down beside her. "Better," she said simply, her eyes meeting mine with a quiet honesty. "I feel like we're finally getting somewhere." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "We are, one step at a time." We didn't have all the answers yet. We hadn't magically fixed everything. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. We had a long road ahead of us, but we were walking it together. And that, for me, was all that mattered. The days that followed felt like a fragile peace settling over our home. Meyer and I had found a new rhythm, one based on open communication, unspoken understanding, and the willingness to admit where we had gone wrong. I had learned to listen more, to be present, and perhaps most importantly, to stop pretending that I could do it all by myself. I wasn't alone. I had my children, and we had each other. That realization alone had been a lifeline. Jamal had opened up too, slowly, quietly, but it was enough. He no longer spent his evenings shut away in his room, and he would sit with me during dinner, talking about school, the friends he had, and his budding interest in music. It wasn't much, but it was progress. And that was all I needed to feel like we were making headway. The walls between us were coming down, bit by bit. At work, I was managing better than I had in months. I had kept my distance from Ethan, focusing entirely on the tasks at hand. There were days when I found myself in meetings, listening to him speak about the direction of the company, but I made sure not to linger too long in conversation. I needed space, not just from him, but from the distractions that had clouded my judgment for too long. I didn't expect things to be perfect. Life never worked that way, but I began to see the cracks I'd once thought irreparable start to heal. I started believing that we could move forward, that maybe we had a chance at real stability, emotionally, financially, and in the ways that really mattered. That was until the phone call came. It was a Thursday afternoon, one of those rare moments where everything seemed in its place. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through some work emails when my phone buzzed across the surface. At first, I didn't recognize the number. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail, but something inside me told me to pick it up. "Hello?" I said, my voice hesitant as I glanced at Maya, who was sitting across from me. "Veronica?" A woman's voice came through the line. It was calm but urgent. "This is Officer Martinez from the U.S. Border Patrol. We need to speak with you about your son, Jamal Johnson." My heart skipped a beat, a cold sweat beginning to form on my brow. "What's going on? Is he okay?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "We need you to come down to the station, MS Johnson. There's been an incident involving your son, and we need you to provide some information." My mind was reeling, the words barely registering. "Jamal? What incident?" My eyes darted to the hallway, where Jamal's room door was slightly ajar, and I felt a tightening in my chest. "I'll be there," I said, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound calm. "What happened? Where is he?" "I can't disclose all the details over the phone," Officer Martinez replied, her voice gentle but firm. "But it's important that you come to us as soon as possible. I'll give you the address." I scribbled the information down, my hands shaking. The minute the call ended, I sat there, frozen. Maya looked up at me, sensing something was wrong immediately. "Mom, what's going on? Who was that?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I didn't want to alarm her, but the panic was starting to rise, suffocating me. "It was the police," I said, my voice low. "They said something's happened with Jamal. I need to go to the station right now." Jamal, Maya's face went pale. What happened? What do they want? I don't know, baby, but I need to go. I'll call you as soon as I know anything. She stood up, walking over to me, her eyes full of concern. I'll come with you. We'll go together. I shook my head, my mind racing with possibilities I wasn't ready to face. No, you stay here. I'll handle it. Just stay here. I'll call you, I promise. I grabbed my jacket, my hands trembling as I pulled it on. I couldn't explain the sinking feeling in my gut, the way my thoughts raced with scenarios I couldn't control. My son was in trouble, real trouble, and I had no idea how deep this went. The drive to the station was a blur, my thoughts swirling like a storm. I kept replaying the officer's words over and over in my head. There's been an incident. The words felt like they were suffocating me, and I couldn't make sense of them. Jamal was only 16. He was quiet, introverted, but he wasn't a criminal. He wasn't someone who would get mixed up in anything dangerous. But what if I had been blind to what was really going on? What if I had missed the signs? What if all of this, the distance between us, the isolation he had started to feel, wasn't just growing pains? What if I had been wrong all along? When I arrived at the police station, I barely remembered parking the car. I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest. The waiting room was empty, save for a few officers going about their business. I approached the counter, trying to steady my breathing. I'm Veronica Johnson, I said to the officer behind the desk. I was told to come here about my son, Jamal. The officer looked up, his expression unreadable. MS, Johnson, please follow me. I followed him down a hallway to a small interrogation room. My mind kept trying to brace for what I was about to hear, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. When I walked into the room, Jamal was sitting at the table, his head bowed, his eyes bloodshot and wide. His hands were resting on the table, trembling. The officer in the room stood by the door, watching silently as I approached him. Jamal, I said softly, my voice cracking as I reached out to him. He looked up at me, his face pale and tight with fear. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I could see the panic in his eyes, the fear of something that was far beyond his control. Jamal, what happened? I whispered, kneeling beside him. He swallowed hard, taking a shaky breath. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They thought I was with someone else and they arrested me. Arrested you? I repeated, trying to piece together what was going on. What do you mean? They said I was involved with some people. They're bad people, Mom. I don't know them. I was just trying to get home from school when they stopped me. My mind was racing now, processing the words that didn't make sense. Bad people? What was he talking about? The officer stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. We're not pressing charges right now, MS Johnson, but we need to investigate. Your son was at the scene of a crime, and we need to sort out exactly what happened. I felt the floor fall away beneath me. A crime? What crime? My voice trembled with disbelief. We'll explain more once we have all the facts, the officer said, not giving anything away. But for now, your son is free to go. We just need to confirm some details. I turned to Jamal, who looked as lost and scared as I felt. You're coming home with me right now, I said, my voice barely steady. He nodded, his face pale but relieved, and together we walked out of the station. As we got in the car, I glanced at him, trying to read his expression. He looked away, staring out the window, lost in thought. Jamal, I began, my voice soft but steady. Whatever this is, we'll get through it. You're not in this alone. We'll figure this out. But in my heart, I wasn't sure we could fix this. Something had shifted. Something was broken, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. The drive home felt like it took forever. The familiar streets of our neighborhood seemed distant, almost foreign, as if they belonged to a life that wasn't ours anymore. Jamal sat quietly beside me, his head leaned against the window, his gaze lost somewhere outside. I didn't know if he was thinking, processing, or just trying to block everything out, but I could feel the weight of his silence pressing on me. I had wanted answers at the station. I had wanted to hear everything, to understand what had happened to my son, to make sense of the mess he had somehow gotten tangled up in. But the officer hadn't said much. There was an air of finality to the words he had used. We need to investigate. We'll explain more once we have all the facts. It had left me feeling even more lost, more unsure of what to do next. By the time we got home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the driveway. Maya was sitting on the front steps, waiting for us, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She must have been pacing back and forth, waiting for an answer that neither Jamal nor I had been able to give. Maya, I said as I pulled into the driveway, my voice shaking slightly. We need to talk. She stood up, her face pale and tense, but she didn't say anything. She just followed me inside, her steps quick, deliberate. Jamal, who had remained eerily quiet during the entire drive, finally looked up at me, his face etched with a kind of guilt I couldn't fully understand. Mom, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I swear I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't involved with them. They just. Maya, please give us a minute, I interrupted softly, turning to face her. Let me talk to him first. Maya hesitated, then nodded and stepped into the kitchen, but I could tell she was listening. I could feel her presence in the air, the quiet intensity of her worry. I turned back to Jamal, whose eyes were fixed on the floor. Jamal, I said, my voice low and firm, I need you to tell me everything, everything, what happened today. Jamal shifted uncomfortably, his fingers twitching like he didn't know where to begin. Finally, he spoke, his voice cracking with emotion. I didn't mean to get caught up in it, Mom. I was just walking home from school and these guys, I don't know them, I swear. They said they needed help with something, and I just kept walking, but then they grabbed me. His eyes darted up to meet mine, pleading for me to believe him. I tried to get away, but they pushed me, and then the cops showed up and they thought I was part of it. I could see the panic in his eyes, the fear that had only grown as he replayed the events in his mind. I stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. What were they involved in, Jamal? What did they want from you? He shook his head, his voice trembling. I don't know. I don't know what they were doing, I swear. They said they needed help carrying something, but I didn't want anything to do with it. I just wanted to go home. I nodded, trying to piece together the fragments of his story. What did they look like? Do you know their names? Do you know what was in the bag? Jamal swallowed hard, his face crumpling as if the weight of it all was too much. I didn't see what was in the bag, Mom. I didn't even know what was going on until the cops showed up. It was then that I realized Jamal had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, but there was something else at play here, something deeper. The way he was reacting, the way he spoke, it didn't seem like a kid who was hiding something. It seemed like someone who was scared and didn't know how to explain himself. I pulled him into a hug, my heart breaking for him. Jamal, I believe you, I do. But we need to be smart about this. We need to be careful. I felt the tension leave his body as he leaned into me, his small frame shaking with emotion. I didn't mean to cause all this, Mom. I didn't know who to trust. I know, I whispered, brushing a hand through his hair. But right now, you need to trust me. We're going to figure this out together. I promise? I could feel his fear, his uncertainty, and it made my heart ache. My son was caught in something he couldn't control, and I had no idea how deep this went. The thought of him being involved with dangerous people, even by accident, terrified me. When we entered the kitchen, Maya was waiting, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her gaze was intense, sharp with worry, but when she saw Jamal's face, her expression softened. She stepped forward, her voice gentle. Jamal, I'm not mad at you. I just want you to know that we're going to get through this. You don't have to do this alone. He looked at her, his eyes red, his voice barely audible. I didn't do anything, Maya, I swear. Maya nodded, her face a mixture of relief and concern. I know you didn't, Jamal. We'll figure this out. Just don't hide anything from us, okay? We need to stick together, no matter what. I stood between them, my heart heavy with the uncertainty that lay ahead. The weight of the situation was pressing down on me, on all of us, and I knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much we didn't understand, so much that had yet to unfold. The fact that Jamal had been dragged into something this dangerous, even if he wasn't involved, scared me more than anything else. Maya, Jamal, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, we're going to get through this. We're going to find out the truth, and we're going to do it together. The words felt like a promise, but deep down, I knew that things weren't going to be as simple as I hoped. The road ahead would be long, filled with questions and unknowns, and the truth would take time to uncover. But we had each other, and that, at least, was something I could hold on to. The next few days felt like they were suspended in time, each one dragging as we waited for answers. Jamal, though still shaken, was doing his best to hold himself together. He'd been quieter than usual, but I could see the effort he was putting in to be strong, to show me that he wasn't going to let this situation break him. It made me proud, but it also broke my heart a little to know how much he was suffering in silence. Maya had been just as supportive, spending time with Jamal and trying to offer him comfort, even though I could see the worry in her eyes. She was always trying to protect us, trying to make everything right. It was a trait she had inherited from me, but I saw it now for what it was, a burden that was too heavy for her to carry alone. Every day, I took steps to rebuild the trust I had almost lost, not just with Maya and Jamal, but with myself. I had spent so much time running from the mess I had made, pretending everything was fine, that I had forgotten how to face it head on. But now I had no choice. Jamal needed me to be strong, Maya needed me to be present, and above all, I needed to be the mother they deserved. We didn't have all the answers yet. The investigation into Jamal's involvement with those men was still ongoing, and we were waiting for more details from the police. But as each day passed, the uncertainty became a little easier to bear. It was clear now that Jamal had been an innocent bystander in a dangerous situation. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that none of this was his fault. He had been caught in a web he didn't know how to navigate, and I had failed him by not seeing it sooner. One evening, after dinner, we sat together in the living room, something that felt like a rare moment of peace for us. Jamal was on the couch, flipping through channels aimlessly, while Maya sat next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. We didn't need to talk about everything that had happened. The silence between us was comfortable now, full of understanding. The cracks in our family were beginning to heal, slowly but surely. I turned to Jamal, who was sitting up a little straighter than usual, a small smile on his face. "How are you feeling?" I asked gently. He looked at me, his expression a little guarded but softening when he met my eyes. "Better, Mom. I'm okay." His voice still held the traces of the fear he'd felt, but there was a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe, or at least the beginnings of it. I reached over and squeezed his hand, feeling a rush of emotion. "We're going to get through this, I promise, but you don't have to carry it all on your own, not anymore." Maya nodded in agreement, her hand resting on mine. "We're a team no matter what." The words we had shared in the past, the promises we had made, now felt like more than just words. They were the foundation we were rebuilding our lives on, together. I knew that we had a long way to go, that there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. Over the next few weeks, we began to rebuild in ways I hadn't expected. The emotional weight that had been hanging over us slowly lifted, piece by piece. I stayed in close contact with the police, keeping track of the investigation. And with each call, I felt more certain that Jamal's involvement in the crime was purely incidental. The authorities were getting closer to finding the real perpetrators, and that gave us some hope. The cloud of uncertainty that had hung over us was beginning to dissipate. At work, Ethan continued to keep his distance, respecting the boundaries I had set. We maintained a professional relationship, but I never let myself forget the lessons I had learned about trusting people and about taking care of myself first. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As we moved forward, I made sure to spend more time with Maya and Jamal. We did small things together, simple things like playing board games, watching old movies, or cooking meals in the kitchen. These moments, though small, became the moments that grounded us. I learned to appreciate them more than anything else. One evening, as I was tucking Jamal into bed, he turned to me, his voice soft but steady. "Thanks, Mom, for being there. I don't know what I would have done without you." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, and I hugged him a little tighter. "I'll always be here, Jamal, always." And just like that, everything that had been broken, every misstep, every failure, every moment of doubt, felt like it was worth it because I had my family. We were still together, still strong. And that was enough. To all of you who have followed our story, who have listened to the highs and lows of our journey, I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude. Life isn't always easy. We face struggles we never thought we'd encounter, and we make mistakes along the way. But the most important thing is that we learn, we grow, and we continue moving forward. Thank you for being a part of this journey. for understanding, for sharing in the difficult moments, and for supporting us in ways I can't fully express. I hope this story has reminded you that no matter how far we fall, we can always rise again, with the strength of the ones we love and the courage to change our own lives. May you find peace in your own families. May you find the courage to face your own struggles. And above all, may you always be surrounded by love. Here's to health, happiness, and the power of family. Take care of each other, always.